and welcome to my little video to show you how you can turn these fabulous panels into bunting for the Christmas season. So it's the same technique for many of the other panels that we're going to be producing, and you've got all the different flags, obviously spelling out happy, space flags to separate the words up, and Christmas. You can see all of those are featured on there on your good size panel. You'll also have the instructions, and the instructions enable you to obviously know exactly what it is that you need to do. So obviously you've got all of the instructions in there, so keep that nice and easy. So you've got your panel, which is made up of your flags. You've also got this coloured strip. Now, dependent on the panel that you buy, you might have your strip which will create the binding or the tape for your flags to go on, or you might have other things on there. There could be panels that you could use for quilts or cushion fronts, but on this particular one you've got the strip that's going to be used for your binding, and it will explain to you exactly that, because you've got your little arrows for your different things. So flags and binding. So the first thing you need to do is to cut out your pieces. Now this can be done in a couple of different ways. You might want to just take simply a pair of scissors. So if you're not a quilter, you'll probably have some scissors that you can use, and you can literally just cut out those pieces following those lines with a pair of scissors if you're wanting to, or if you prefer you can use a rotary cutter. So that's using your scissors. Rotary cutter, obviously you're going to protect your area, so you're going to need a cutting mat. You'll also need a quilting ruler, which you'll use along the size of the pieces that you're cutting, and then obviously you just cut those with your rotary cutter like so, and that should separate those up. Whoops, like that. I think I need a new blade in mine, so oops, try that again. So just cut those along there. Cut it along the edge, just line up your ruler and cut. Do 2 cuts to be on the safe side, and then 2 cuts to separate your flags. You're also going to do the same with the binding as well. So again, scissors or rotary cutter, whichever is your chosen method, and then once you've got all your pieces, you go on to the next stage. So once you have finished, you will have your instructions, so keep those because you'll need those in a little while. You'll have a strip of fabric that we'll use for binding, but we need to further cut that, so we're just going to pop that to one side for a minute, and then you'll have all of your flags, which you can put into order if you want at this stage. When you're cutting them out, don't be too precious about if you've got little white edges on there. They'll actually get lost in the seam allowance, so don't worry too much about those. But now that we've got our flags, I'm just going to put those to one side and bring my cutting mat back in again, because we're going to turn attention to the binding strip. Now the binding strip needs to be cut into 2-inch strips, so it'll measure itself as 6, so it's 6 inches wide, and what I'm going to do is cut these into 2-inch strips. So you can fold it in half like so, and fold it in half again, and so just make sure that it's all lined up neatly, and you'll see that it's 6 inches across. So I'm going to cut it at 2-inch intervals to give us our binding tape that we'll come to use in a later stage. So come in with your quilting ruler, use the edges of your mat if you've got a mat, or you can just, if you wanted to, draw a line with a pen, cut it down, and then use your scissors or as I'm going to do is I'm going to use my rotary cutter. So just make sure it's all lined up, all nice and flush, and then cut through 2 inches, and then the last bit at 2 inches. Obviously, if you want to, then you can create your own bias tape in a different way, your own tape in a different way, or you can use pre-bought, but this will actually be used in a little while later. So it's time to start getting ready for sewing. Now we'll come back to our tape in a little while, but we're going to turn our attention to the flags to start with. So the way that it works with the flags is you will work with them individually, and you'll have it so as the letter is the right way up. And if you follow your instructions, you'll be able to see with right sides together, line up. So this is how it comes from your tag, your cutout piece. Line up the right hand side with the bottom edge. So that right hand side is going to line up with this bottom edge here, which means folding it on the diagonal like so. Okay. Now, if you want to, you can clip it or put pins in it. It's entirely up to you. But just make sure that if you do rotate it round, that you are putting it in the right place. So that side is going to line up with the bottom edge, like so. And then you're just going to clip it with your quilt clips if you're wanting to. There we go. I'm floundering around trying to find my quilt clips, but we have got a pattern for a pouch that you can keep your quilt clips in, which is a lot easier. You know exactly where they are. So fold them on the diagonal. You do each one, so have it right way round. Right side comes down to the bottom. Clip or pin. And we do that with each one. Right side down to the bottom. And clip. Now, with this one, the space, this particular one doesn't have a letter on there for you to get the right way round. So I would take one of the letter ones and then line this up to make sure that you've got the pattern going in the right direction. So just make sure that that's the same with regard to the diagonal. I think it's pretty symmetrical, to be honest, but on this one you can see that the red line is going in that way, and on that one it's going that way. So I'm just going to turn that round so as that red line is going continually. So you've got yellow and red, yellow and red. So then I know that that flag is going to be the same as that flag. So I'm just going to pull that down like so. Clip that together. Oops. And do that with all of these. So now I've got my flags ready to sew. What we're going to do is we're going to sew down here with a 1/2 centimetre seam allowance. So I'm going to take those over to the sewing machine and get those sorted. With a 1/2 centimetre seam allowance, sew along the edge of your flags. Feed them in with the flat end rather than the pointed end to ensure a nice clean start to each of those flags. When you get to the pointed end, just continue to sew a few more stitches and then feed in the next flag. This is called chain piecing, and it saves on thread because you'll simply snip those flags apart when you've completed them. So here we have our flags, and our flags are all joined together with these little threads. So all you need to do now is just go through and separate them up. So once you stitch the seam on all of your flags, we're going to need to cut off that last little bit of bulk that you've got there. So, whoops, there you go. You've got a little triangle there. So I'm just going to cut that away. Just make sure that you don't cut into the stitching, and you're just cutting away that little bit of bulk that you've got just to there, just to make it a little bit easier for you to turn through it and get a nice crisp edge. I'm going to press those next. So you work your way through all of those. And then when you're finished, you're going to press them into place. So get your iron and you're going to turn these through. So you'll turn your tag through. So put your thumbs in, like so. Turn it inside out. Variety of different ways you can turn these through. You might have something like a knitting needle, which you might want to use. So you can use that to turn it through and get that to point through, like so. What I tend to use is I use the my quilting ruler that's got the mitered edge on it. So basically you push that in like so, and that will give you that nice pristine tip on there. This particular set is made up of 3 different rulers. So you've got the mitered ruler that you can see there. Let's move that out of the way. You've got the mitered ruler. You've also got your patchmaker square for quilting, and you've also got this one, which we will use for creating the binding in a little while. So, as I say, that gives you that nice pristine point. And then what we're going to do is going to turn it over, and it's almost making like a kite shape. I'm just going to press it like so. Now each one of these will be pressed, and you'll see that your flag will start to take shape, like so. And then all you do is you'll turn it over, and that piece there will fold down. Fold it down so as you've got that horizontal line there. Give it another little press like so, and then that will just tuck inside to give you your bunting flag. So there you go. So you can do that with all of these, and then we'll put them all together. Now we need to make the tape that the flags will hang from. So you take the 3 2-inch strips that we've created, and we need to make them into a continuous run. So take 2 of the strips and right sides together, overlap them at the end. You're then going to draw a line on the diagonal at 45 degrees, and you can use the edge of your quilt ruler in order to do so. This will mean that when we stitch along the line and open up the tape, you'll have a continual run, and this is a technique you will find yourself using if you go on to binding a quilt. So draw a line. You can just eyeball it if you prefer. And here you go. If you imagine that's a stitch line, fold it out, and you can see that your tape continues in a nice straight line. That diagonal seam means that you're not going to have a lot of bulk at the back of your tape when you come to fold it. So it's not a bad technique to get used to. So I'm just going to stitch along that line. So you can see I've stitched along the line there, and then when I open that up and press it, I'll have that continual run of bias tape. I'll just cut across that excess in just a second. So now I have stitched together my long piece, so you can see I've got two seams. I've got that one there, and there's another one a little bit further along, and when these open up, these will create our flat bias tape. So all you need to do is cut away the excess, so trim to the side like so, trim to the side like so. And I've done this one slightly wrong, just so as you can see. So here, what I actually did was line up the edges. Cut that away a bit too soon to show you. So this one overlapped a little bit. So the actual seam comes in just a little tad. So when you open it out, you've got a continual run. On this one, it was slightly wrong, because when you open it up, you end up with this kind of separation, but don't worry, because that will get actually lost within, so don't worry about that. So we're going to press this and turn it into tape. So first thing I'm going to do is where you've got your seam. Now I like to press it open so as the bulk is on both sides, so it's up to you, and you can either use a little roller like so and press it down, and that will keep it quite flat as you work with it. So you can press it quite flat, as I say, or you can just come along with your iron and press it with your iron, whatever suits you best. And then obviously you can press it that side as well. The result of this is you end up with your continual piece of tape. Okay, but what we now need to do is fold in these ends. Now there's a few ways you can do this. I actually use my square, but all you need to do is you fold the pieces in together like so, and you press like so, and you just kind of move it along and press as you go. But it's a little bit fiddly doing that, so you would kind of do that, you would press and hold it and press and that kind of thing. But what I actually do is I use the binding square, and I find this useful because I can actually feed my tape through like so. Use a couple of little pins, oops, and that can secure the fabric on the end. So one on that side and one on that side, and then all I do is I will take this and I can move it along to start, but what I can also do is press and just slide it along, and that makes it easier to create your tape. And take your pins out and just move it along, and then again move it along and bring it along like so. Again, because we're making tape to go on bunting, I don't worry too much about the these pieces, these little lines meeting up here. I don't worry too much. So if they don't meet up completely, then yeah, I don't worry. So if you've got a bit of a gap, then I don't worry too much about it. And then just keep doing that until you've completed your piece of tape. Go. So then you'll end up with a long piece of tape. So what I tend to do is I will fold it in half and press it, and again, if you're doing it without the ruler, you can just push that through and press it as you go. Or you can again feed it through. And tension it. And then again use the ruler. To press it as you go. So when you're finished, you end up with 3 meters of tape roughly. So all I'm going to do is find the centre point now, and this is where we will start assembling our flags. So just find the 2 ends together and then just roughly run the tape through your fingers to find roughly where the centre point is, which is about there. And what you can do is just put a little pin so you know roughly where that point is. Okay, so that's roughly the centre point. So we've got our flags. So you need to find the centre of the flags. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So because we have got an odd number, we can have a flag sitting, because we've got an odd number, we can have a flag sitting in the middle. So we've got 15 flags. So we'll have 7 on one side, 7 on the other, and then 1 sitting in the middle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then that will be our centre flag. So that's 7. That will be our centre flag, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they will come to the other side. So 7 in that pile, 1 in the middle, and 7 on that side. So that will keep it all perfectly balanced. So position that centre flag where the pin was. So tuck each side of the tape around the flag that you're putting in place. Clip there to keep it in the centre of the tape, and then there's just a couple of other clips there just to make sure that it's all secure for when it comes to sewing at a later stage. It's up to you whether you want to continue with the right hand side or the left hand side. I'm going to work with the left hand side, and we just need to decide on the spacing between the flags. Now obviously too much spacing of all those flags can mean that you run out of tape, or you don't have much tape left to hang your bunting up with. So I started off with a couple of inches, and then I did find that I didn't have a lot of tape at the end. So you could use your ruler and kind of position that each time you're putting a flag in place, or I made a little paper template, just took some paper, folded it over so as it's roughly 1 inch wide, and then I've used that as my guide. You don't have to make a guide, you can just do it by eye if you're wanting to. And then we're going to work with those flags in reverse order. And all I'm going to do is put them again in the centre of that tape to secure the raw edges of the flags. And then again, just make sure that you've got that spacing, and then clip them in place. Now it doesn't have to be an exact measurement, that spacing, because when they're hanging up you won't necessarily see it, but key thing is get those raw edges in and get the spacing roughly the same between each of the flags, and then you just continue until you put all of the flags in place. So you just carry on putting those flags in place until you get to the last one. And this is when you can see how much tape you've got left over. So it's about 9 inches of a run that I've got there. So that's plenty enough really for you to create a bit of a loop. And that's with an inch gap between each of those flags. So you could stitch that in place so you've got a loop that you can hang it up with, or you can just leave it loose so as you can tie it around. And it's entirely up to you. If you do want to stitch it in place, you can do. So once you've got that all sorted, you go back to the centre and then you work from the centre to the right hand side. And because you've already done 1/2 and you know how much is left over with that 9 inches, you pretty much can be sure that when you do get to the other end, then you're going to have a similar sort of amount of fabric left over. So there we go, all the flags are in place. It's always a good idea to check that you've actually got them in correct order at this point. So just work your way through, checking that the flags have got the spacing that you want, you've not got any back to front, and that they actually spell out the right phrase. So on this occasion it's Happy Christmas. And then once you're happy with all of that, then it's time for you to actually take it over to your sewing machine and stitch it all together. So we're going to sew this from the very end of the tape right the way along, and we're just going to kind of top stitch it just inside the double folded edge, so the edge that's kind of encapsulating the flags as you go. So yeah, nudge your needle over if you need to, but yeah, just make sure that you're catching all of the flags as you work your way through, and then just stitch along that run. There we go. Last thing to do is to decide where you're going to hang your bunting. Thank you for watching.